So now Packers training camp is only 2 days away, and so as always, we'll get to watch all these different position battles going on this Packers roster as we move through training camp, move through the preseason games, and get to the point where the Packers move from their about 90-man roster down to 53 players. And so I want to go over the 3 biggest position battles I will be keeping an eye on. Of course, at every single position, there is going to be competition for some of the final spots at each of those positions. There are some positions where I'd say there's more clarity on who the top guys are. There are a few where there's a little more uncertainty. So I want to get into some of that. And if you guys have not subscribed, you want to stay up to date with all things Packers, stay tuned for training camp update videos, and feel free to turn on the post notifications. So anytime I make a video on the Packers news, you'll get notified right away. So first off, I think the position where there is the most uncertainty right now, just when it comes to the starters, is the Packers offensive line. If we look at their decisions and moves they made this offseason, they bring in Aaron Banks from the 49ers to a massive 4-year, $77 million deal. They decide to draft Anthony Belton in round 2. And then looking back to last season, they drafted Jordan Morgan round 1. Unfortunately, he missed a ton of time due to injury. And so now with Josh Myers moving on, Aaron Banks taking over at left guard, Elgton Jenkins moving to center, we'll see what happens there with his contract situation, his injury, which I touched on a little bit earlier today on this channel. There's just a lot of uncertainty here when it comes to these positions. First off, looking at left tackle, Rasheed Walker played some really good football last year at left tackle. He is in the final year of his deal, and I think just best case scenario for the Packers is that someone else wins the left tackle job over Rasheed Walker, just because if Rasheed Walker did win the job, then that's awesome for him. But just from a financial perspective, if Rasheed Walker wins the job and you're not confident in Jordan Morgan or Anthony Belton taking over next season at left tackle, then you're going to have to pay Rasheed Walker a lot of money. Where if Jordan Morgan were to win the job at left tackle, then, going into 2026, you have a player on a rookie deal. You don't have to pay Rasheed Walker a ton of money in the tackle market, which is very expensive nowadays. And so I think best case scenario for the Packers financially is, Jordan Morgan or Anthony Belton winning the left tackle job. But it is going to be a competition, I think, between Walker, Jordan Morgan, Anthony Belton. We'll sort of see what happens there. Left guard, Aaron Banks is the left guard. There's not going to be a competition there. Elgton Jenkins will be the center as long as he's healthy, as long as the Packers and him can come to an agreement with his contract. I assume they will, but I don't think we can rule out things getting more complicated there. And if for whatever reason Jenkins, whether it's injury, whether it's contract concerns, isn't ready to go at center, whether that's in training camp or preseason, then I think it's going to be either Jacob Monk, last year's 5th-round draft pick, or Sean Ryan, who would also probably be able to play a little bit of center. And if Jenkins misses time, which it looks like he will, starting on the NFI non-football injury list, then we're going to get to see what Jacob Monk and Sean Ryan have to offer at center. So if Jenkins is back and healthy, contract situation ironed out, he's definitely the center. If not, we'll see what happens there. Then right guard, there's more competition here. It could be Sean Ryan, it could be Jordan Morgan, it could be Anthony Belton, and so we'll sort of have to see how the left tackle battle goes, how the right guard battle goes. Those should impact each other. I think we could see any of those guys playing right guard. Sean Ryan is also in the final year of his deal, and so whoever wins that job, that will impact the money the Packers pay. If Sean Ryan wins the right guard job and he's clearly the answer, do they decide to give him a deal in the offseason? Or do they, they probably would want someone like Anthony Belton to take over at right guard. And just like with Rasheed Walker at left tackle, I think better case scenario is, let's say Morgan were to win left tackle. Will it happen? I don't know. But if Belton won the right guard job, then you're not having to pay Sean Ryan starting guard money, and you have Anthony Belton on a cheap rookie deal. So, of course, we'll sort of see how that irons out. It doesn't always work out perfectly based on who you would want to pay. And so there is a lot of talent here on the offensive line, and I think there's enough to have a solid unit no matter who is starting. And then you have Zach Tom, who is solidified at right tackle, and hopefully before the season we see a contract extension done for Zach Tom, because I definitely think he deserves it. The second battle that I'm very interested in is the running back battle. Josh Jacobs, no doubt, number one running back. Don't need to say anything on that. But then the real question becomes who is going to win this second running back job? Because Marshawn Lloyd, drafted third round last year from USC, is a player with a ton of potential. The unfortunate reality for him in his rookie season, in camp, throughout the entire year, is he consistently dealt with injuries. And so hopefully we can see him come into 2025 and be able to stay healthy, because if he does, I think he does bring something that some of these other backups don't bring, like Wilson and Chris Brooks. He just has a level of speed and explosiveness that not many of these guys have. And if you watch some of his USC highlights, you can sort of see just his ability to break things away pretty much every single play. He's a pretty strong back as well, fast, 5'9", 220 pounds. Matt LaFleur talked about his great explosiveness earlier in this offseason. And so the battle's going to be between him, Emmanuel Wilson, and Chris Brooks. And I think Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks both played some really good football last season. Wilson averaged 4.9 yards a carry, had a total of 502 rushing yards, solid numbers, played really well. And Chris Brooks also played really well in his short amount of snaps at 5.1 yards per carry. And so I think Marshawn Lloyd has a little bit more just athletic ability overall, but that's going to be one to watch. And if I had to guess, I would say if Lloyd can stay healthy, I feel like he will take over that second running back spot, but I think we'll still see some of Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks, even if Lloyd were to win that job. Now the final one here, I was looking through the different positional battles, and I think that the next one is wide receiver. I think at the top of the wide receiver depth chart, there's more certainty. Matthew Golden, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, in my mind, will be the starters, in 3 wide receiver sets. But then when you move on from there, you got Savion Williams, you have Dontavian Wicks, Bo Melton, Malik Heath, McCole Hardman. The question for me is, will Dontavian Wicks be able to solidify himself as receiver number 4? Will Savion Williams be able to move past him? I just think with Wicks, he's been here for a couple of years now, and while he has dealt with a ton of drop issues, he knows the Packers offense better than Savion Williams, I would assume, with Williams being a rookie. And with Wicks, he's an insanely talented route runner. And that's the thing with him. If he can just fix his hands, fix his drop issues, then I still think he has a really good chance to be a very solid receiver. And so that's one to watch there. And the thing with Savion Williams is, while he may need to get better when it comes to route running, the way that he was used at TCU a lot, in the backfields, when it came to screens, it wouldn't be shocking to see the Packers use him and just try to get the ball in his hands because of just his ability to break away and, break tackles, things like that. So I would assume we'll see a lot of Savion Williams in different creative ways where Matt LaFleur can get him the ball. But we'll sort of see how that position battle goes there. And then Bo Melton, Malik Heath, McCole Hardman, they're going to be vying for one of these final wide receiver spots depending on how many receivers the Packers keep, whether it's 5, 6, 7. One of those guys could potentially fail to make the roster just because of the amount of talent the Packers have here. Then you also have Sam Brown Jr., Cornelius Johnson, and Julian Hicks. So those are, I would say, the biggest positional battles I will be keeping an eye on. As I said, there will be other ones going on as well, but those are the biggest ones in my mind. But if you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe. Turn on the post notifications so you don't miss any training camp updates or Packers news. I would thank you guys for watching as always, and I'll see you guys next time.